Greetings everyone! It is time to learn about linear perspective. That is what we're working on with our new section. So you have watched or viewed the PowerPoint presentation and have been able to look at images that tell you about 1 point or linear perspective as well as 1 point linear perspective. So what it is we're dealing with planes and edges and how they appear to recede in space towards a common point as they go away from us. So we're going to learn how to communicate that on a two-dimensional surface to create the most realistic three-dimensional subjects down on our page. So we have two really big keys when we're talking about linear perspective. One is diminishing size and the other is convergence. So as things get further away from you, they appear to get smaller, and in reality they're the same size. They don't shrink, but they're just further away from us. The other thing that happens is that parallel edges appear to converge at 1 point out in the distance, and we know them to be like the edges of a road or the tracks of a train. They have to be parallel in order for traffic to run smoothly, but the appearance is that they converge. So those are two of the key ideas that let you know that you're working with perspective. That's what you're seeing. Now we have main components, and those would be your vanishing point, your horizon line, and your convergence lines. So our vanishing point is on the horizon, and that's what I was talking about, where those edges seem to converge at 1 point. That's your vanishing point, where things tend to vanish at. The horizon line we'll also talk about as being our eye level, and the horizon line is where the earth meets the sky. So if you've ever gone out to the ocean and looked out of the water and you see the water and then you see the sky, that's the horizon line. We're going to use that interchangeably with our eye level, and that is where your vanishing point finds its home for 1 point perspective. We also have our convergence lines, known as receding lines and orthogonal lines. So the latter of those is really a mouthful, so I don't use that very often. I do use receding lines a lot, so as I'm going through the demonstration, if I use convergence lines or receding lines, I'm talking about the same thing. In 1 point perspective, we have one dimension of a three-dimensional subject receding, so that would be the depth. So the lines and planes running the direction that you're looking, that would be your depth, and that's what's going towards that vanishing point. Otherwise, you have true shapes which maintain horizontal and vertical edges. Those would be parallel to you, parallel to the observer, and that is one of the keys that lets you know that you're looking at something in 1 point linear perspectives, that you have one dimension that's receding, and to a single point on the horizon line. So our basic form is the cube or a box, and that is a literal building block. We can start with that shape and add to, chisel away from, work within, stack, stretch, all of those things in order to create a perspective drawing. So what tools do we need for this? We're going to be going through the assignment as per usual, and what we're using today, newsprint, and we've got 2 sheets. You're going to be using your HB graphite pencil, a technical pen, and a ruler. I have many rulers, not just 3. I have a lot of rulers. I'm not a collector of rulers. I just have more than I probably need, but it's nice to have varying sizes depending on what it is that you're working on. The 24-inch ruler is the one that I prefer for classwork because my paper is 24 inches, so that spans that width, as well as if I'm building in a corner, I have no problem reaching from my vanishing point in the center all the way out for any of those convergence lines. So that big long ruler is really helpful in that regard. The 18-inch rulers are a bit more manageable. So that, and cheaper as well, right? Less material, less money. And then this little guy, this little chiquito, this one is my favorite for making short lines. And I like it because it's a lot more manageable. It's the size of my other utensils, my other drawing tools. So it makes it really manageable. It's also a clear plastic with grid lines on it, so it makes it easier for me to see my horizontal and vertical lines if I'm lining up with that same direction throughout. So ruler, or rulers plural, and technical pen and graphite. So the first thing that we want to do when we're starting with perspective drawing is we want to define our horizon line. Well, actually, the very first thing that you want to do is arrange your paper so you have a horizontal orientation. That means that it's facing you where it's longer than it is tall. So we want to have that 24 inches spread out across. Think of it as a landscape. And when we're working with perspective, a lot of times we're working with buildings or cities, and we want to have all that room to describe above and below the horizon. So we're going to orient our paper so that it's horizontal, and then we're going to draw a horizon line, which is a horizontal line stretching from, oops, run it along your ruler, from the left edge to the right edge. All right, there it is. Beautiful. And after we place our horizon line, I'm going to erase my flub so that I don't get confused later. We're going to be placing our vanishing point centrally on that horizon line. So if you're checking this out, I don't know if you're having a hard time seeing where my vanishing point is, but here I'm going to put VP and then I'm going to draw an arrow, and it's right there. You do not need to do that part, right? We just need our horizon line and our vanishing point. I would like for you to note that it is a point and it is not a circle or a small planet. It's just a point. The bigger that becomes, the harder it is for you to go to the exact same point. So that's what I'm trying to help you with. All right, so each of our drawings is going to start this way: horizon line and vanishing point, central, right? And then what we need to do is start with a shape. So right now we have the information we need to understand what is lower than our eye level, what's above our eye level, and area to create. But we don't have anything to reach back to that point. So we always need to start with a shape that goes back to that point. So I'll begin, in the assignment I asked for you to make 10 boxes, and those 10 boxes are all going to use that same vanishing point. So you will be working around your format, around the picture plane. I'll be drawing boxes down here and up here and over here and down this way and maybe even over my horizon line. So they're going to be everywhere. So let's begin. Actually, I'll start over here. I want to block the view for this first one. What I would like for you to strive for is to maintain your verticals in relationship to the vertical edge of the paper. So this vertical needs to be parallel, in other words, to the vertical edge of the paper. And the same thing with my horizontal lines. They need to be parallel to your horizon line as well as the horizontal edge of your paper. And it might seem like perspective drawing has a lot of rules. Well, it kind of does. And it does because that's how it functions, right? If we have all these wonky lines, then it ceases to create the illusion very well. So that's what we're trying to keep. So I have this square shape. That's my beginning step. Horizon line, vanishing point, shape. And for us, we're making squares, rectangles, any version that's gonna give you those 4 edges, okay? And it could be tiny, big, anywhere in the middle. Once I've drawn my shape, then I need to reach to my vanishing point. And I have 4 corners, and from each of those corners, I'm going to draw a convergence line back to that vanishing point. So I'm going to line up with that corner and draw to my point, and I'm going to move over to my next corner, and I've got one down here. And I've got one more. So right now I only have 3, and that would do because if I were making a box or a cube that were opaque. However, I want you to have practice creating all 6 sides of your cube / box, because you not only want to create exteriors, but you want to create interiors as well. And the entire construction demonstrates how you would run through that process. And for my last corner. Okay, so what that gives me essentially is a front plane. So that shape, right? A shape is flat, a form is dimensional. I started with a shape. As soon as I started taking those receding lines back to the vanishing point, I automatically created a volume or a form. Now what we have is the appearance of a form continuing on to an unknown length, right? It's so long and it's stretching way back. I would like to define where the depth of this is, right? So I'm describing the depth of my box by taking those lines back, but I don't have a determined space, right? It goes on forever. So what we're going to do is we're going to cut that off or make a dividing line. And I would also like to share with you this thing that I used to do as a kid, and maybe you did it too. And I'll do that back here so that I don't mess up anybody's understanding. But I used to draw a boxed sort of form, and then I would draw another one a little bit smaller behind it, and then I would take lines and connect the corners. So if that looks familiar to you, that's 1-point perspective, and maybe you didn't know that then, and it's sloppy 1-point perspective for a couple of reasons. One, these angles don't all go back to a single point, but what we're doing is we're starting with this shape, and then our objective is to create the back plane. So the front and the back run parallel to each other. So that's what we're trying to do. So as we set up our shape and then we turn it into a form going to that vanishing point, we then have to create the back of the box. So that's where we have to divide that space, and we come down here, run across, and come back up. So you're doing that, but you're doing that with a proper rate of recession, so the illusion stays consistent throughout your drawing. So again, shape, receding lines from each of the 4 corners, and then you get to determine how deep you would like your box to be. And that's it right there. That's my dividing line. So if you get confused, always look at your starting shape. I have a horizontal line in my beginning shape that runs from here to here. So if I follow those receding lines back, then the back edge of this plane needs to do the same thing as the front edge, and it needs to work within those same parameters, so those same guide lines. So I have my division here, and that's really the hardest part, is just choosing where you would like to divide your depth. once I know that, then I have a starting point to make my next line. So again, if I get confused, then I look at my initial shape. I came across, and then I have a vertical line that comes down. So I came across, and now I have a starting point, and if I look and follow this receding line, that's my end point, and I need a vertical line. So turn my ruler. My aim again is to be parallel with the edges of the page, and of course throughout my subject. Great, so I've come across and down. I need to go over, and I'm going to be working corner to corner, follow those lines back. I have a starting point right where I touch down, and that's where I need to come across to this line here. And this is a horizontal line, so I need to move my ruler so it's horizontal. And line up here and run all the way over. The next thing in the last line, right, over, down, across, and up. So I just need one more vertical line. And if I look back here, it seems relatively obvious to me that I just have a little U shape right now, right, resting on its side going that way. So I want to close that off, and I do that with my last vertical line. Here to here. And I have just such a distance that I have an overlap of where the front plane and the back plane meet. So this is our basic box construction. So let me do it again for you. Let me work above the horizon line this time, and I'll go to the other side. So we'll start with our shape, and let's make something that is oblong, right? Maybe rectangular would be a nice way to say that. Come in here, and then here. It's important for you to keep a nice pointy tip on your pencil. It's really helpful to make sure that you're extending from corners to the actual vanishing point. So once I have my shape, right, and I have a different shape this time. I have a rectangle, a nice tall rectangle, and it's above the horizon line. So what I notice is when something is below my eye level, when I'm looking down on a subject, I can see the top of it. And the vanishing point is letting me know where I am relative to the subject. So I can see the top, and then the subject's off to the left-hand side, so I get to see its right side really well, really clearly. So here, my subject is above my eye level, and when I look up at things like balconies, whatever, choose something, you are able to see the bottom. So we have our shape, and we're going to go from each corner to our vanishing point. So start in the corner, run back, start in the corner, run back, start in the corner, and back, all four corners. And you don't need to press very hard, so you'll probably find that you're gonna, if you push too hard, the middle of your paper is going to end up with a hole in it because you're going back continually to that same spot for 10 of these boxes. So gentle, gentle. Okay, so I have my shape. I have all of my convergence lines heading towards the vanishing point from the corners, each corner. So now I need to determine the depth. How far back do I want my box to extend? Because right now it goes forever. So I'm going to make a little shorty this time. So just something real tiny. So I'm just going to go ahead and divide here. So again, I'm following along my initial shape. I love to place my division lines where I can see really clearly. So on this subject, I could see the top here with no interruption of another receding line. So it's really very clear. Over here, the same thing happens on the bottom. I don't have this receding line coming through, so it's easier for me to not become confused because we have a lot of lines. So I'm just recreating this shape in proportion as it recedes. So here to here, I can always follow those receding lines back and know I'm working here to here. Once I run into a diagonal, all of our diagonals are going to be connected to corners and to the vanishing point. If you have a diagonal that's headed off this direction or out here, I hate to say it, but you're doing it wrong. We want all the diagonals to be from corners to vanishing point, and verticals and horizontals to be for our planes that are parallel to us. When we run into a diagonal or a receding line, that is our cue to change direction because we have a corner. So I came over and I need to come up. So I'm going to turn my ruler so that it's vertical. And then I'm going to move from there and I'm going to come all the way up. So again, following my initial shape, and then I stop along that receding line. So right now I have those 3 planes, front, side, and bottom, but I need top, the other side, and the back. So I have some good information. I came over and up, I need to come back across, and I need to come down. So I'm going to turn my ruler, and I'm looking at moving here to here. So I already have my starting point. I'm going to end along this diagonal, that receding line. There. And then my connection, right, I move from this corner to this corner for my last vertical. So I'm moving from this corner to this corner. All right, let's place that in. All right, so this is our construction, and we do this 8 more times so that you get the hang of it. And how I would like for you to finish these boxes, and you can do this as you go along, box by box, or if you want to do all of the pen work at the end, that's fine too, whatever your fancy is. So I would like for you to emphasize our finished shape. So you don't need to erase your receding lines. I would like to see those. You say, wow, Miss Dees, for all the erasers you had us get, we sure aren't using very many of them. Oh, not yet. We're going to get through perspective, and then we're going to move into value, and you're going to use them a lot. So with our pens, we're going to come in and make, we're going to define the box shape. So once you start getting more of these, and please use your ruler, no freehanding of this. It looks terrible when you do that for the most part. I'm sure there are some of you that are incredible with line work and maybe you don't need a ruler, but just humor me and always use one. For the exterior of our boxes, let's go ahead and use a solid line. And I detailed that in the homework assignment. So when I look at this, now what I see is that idea of a box, right? It's some kind of a container. And when I look at my pencil lines inside, then it is more clear to me that that is an interior space. So for the inside, instead of a solid line, let's use a broken line. So we're just going to come through again. I'm utilizing my ruler still. And the last one here. Okay, so there's that one. And then if we were to come up to this other box, again, all of our exterior lines are going to be hard. The other thing that's nice about the plastic ruler is that acrylic is transparent so I can see my I can see my lines better where they're matching up. And something that you'll find out as you're working along is the pen as well as the pencil has a diameter, so you may need to adjust your ruler a little bit away from your line so that it stays in the right place. So this thickness, if I put my ruler right up on the line that I want, which is what happened here, it actually pushes it in a little bit. So I need to make room for that thickness. So I have all my exterior defined. Now I would like to come through and make visible the lines that I would like to keep to showcase my finished box. So again, coming through with that broken line, dotted line, and for my last piece through here. Okay, so we're going to do this 8 more times. Ready? I'm ready. And again, moving around the format. Please, if you do run into an overreach on your corners, or you have a line that goes off and it shouldn't be there, then that's something that you would want to use your eraser for. So draw the shape. Connect to the corners. So it doesn't matter where I place my shape on the format. The process remains the same, and that's something that's really beautiful about perspective, is that it's consistent. And in talking about consistency, whatever you do to one side of a subject in perspective, you're going to do to the other side. Whatever you do at the top, you're going to do on the bottom. So that's a good thing to keep in mind. So now we're going to divide that space. I'm going to make something that's a little bit longer this time. And this is an interesting one because I have all of my receding lines stacked right here. Because this is at my eye level, I won't see the top or bottom if it's opaque. So I'm just seeing the front and then this left plane. So I have a lot of lines to choose from, including the horizon line. But again, if I look at my original shape, then I follow these receding lines back, and that tells me where to put the vertical line is right within those boundaries. Okay, and the same thing is once I have that, then I just follow this around. So it's a connect the dots kind of a thing. So I need a horizontal line down here along the bottom. And I also need one up here at the top. And I need a vertical line to connect the two. Something that you may experience is that maybe you're going along in your drawing and you end up like you have these two pieces coming together and you want to connect them with a vertical line, but it actually doesn't connect them. You have to have this angled line to connect them. That lets you know that your receding lines are probably not going back to the exact same spot, or it could be that they're not connecting to the corners exactly. So the thing about perspective is that you have to be consistent, and it needs to, it's a really solid process. So just keep at it and you'll do really well. But in most cases, if that's your experience is a mismatch, then it's probably just that you didn't go right to the corner or to the same spot for all the receding, for the same vanishing point for all the receding lines. And remember that we're just inking with solid lines on the exterior. Yeah, using the clear one is a lot easier to see where I'm going to stop. So these are my solid lines for the exterior, broken lines for interior information. So it just means I'm picking up and putting down, using my ruler still so that I can have those in a straight line. It just, the illusion stops working when you stop using the ruler. So or I should say it stops working as well. And we want to get used to a strong work ethic of that hard edge, and then you can move away from it as you keep constructing. Okay? Something that you would like to notice is that as my objects get further away from my eye level, the angles become more extreme. So notice that here I'm looking at this angle, right? I'm up higher in the picture plane, closer to the eye level or the horizon line. As the subject comes down further, look at how much more extreme. So here, and then here. So, and then even to look at this one, it becomes more flat. So you'll have that sensation. You'll also notice that as I get closer to the vertical as well as horizontal axis, the less I see of the plane that is closest to that axis point. So on this subject, you can see right here that the top plane is a lot more narrow than the bottom It's because it's getting closer. If you put your eye like right at the level of something and you don't see the top, but then you pop your head up a little bit more and you can see the surface. That's what's going on, is that as it's almost like we're just right on the edge of it. So as my subjects get closer to that vertical axis, I lose that width on the side of the subject. So you're not doing anything wrong. It's just part of the happening of that subject. So you can see how narrow that space is, but that's letting me know, right? That's my cue visually as the observer that I am, that box is coming more in line with me. And if I'm just right in front of that vanishing point, then I'm not going to see any of the exterior sides. But we're constructing these as if they were transparent, so we can see all of 6 sides. And then my last line is connecting. There. there I have it. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10 boxes, all using the very same vanishing point. And you could do that if you wanted to in pen. That is on our horizon line, so all 10 boxes utilizing that point. Okay, so with this part done, then what we have is the next portion of our assignment. So we're going to be using, and go ahead and just take that off. We're going to be using a new sheet, and we start the very same way, is placing our horizon line in somewhere near the middle of the page, running across. And for this assignment, what we're going to do is we're going to be making 4 boxes. Oh, so we need our horizon line, and we need our vanishing point at about the middle here. Okay, so those are the things that we need to start with, and then we're going to construct 4 boxes, and I would like for you to do that above and below the horizon line and to the left and right. Okay, so it'll look like this, and this is the very same process that you just did. We're going to make a little bit bigger boxes so that we can really, actually I should make it even bigger, so we can really test out these 4 ideas that I'm going to present. Below the horizon line as well. Again, we're trying to keep things horizontals parallel to the horizon line and the horizontal edge of the paper, and our verticals perpendicular or at a right angle to our horizon line, and our verticals parallel to the edges of our paper. It sets up a really solid structure and helps us in that believability of the illusion we're creating. So once we have our, and you could build them one at a time, I'm just going to be going through and placing all of our information. So once I have my true form or my shape for that front plane, I'm going to take my receding lines back. Again, same process as before with those 10 boxes in 1 point perspective. We're building 4 more. And then within those 4, we're going to be trying on different concepts. And again, I drew large boxes, and I would like to have quite a bit of depth. So we're going to go ahead and divide the plane that's receding. We're going to give ourselves a lot of space to work in. So I don't want anything really narrow. I need you to have room to explore these different ideas. So let's place our marker. Let's give ourselves a bit of room here. Right in here. You got to keep your verticals and horizontals parallel to one another, otherwise you end up with a mismatch. So I was talking about that with our 10 boxes, is if you end up with really wonky lines that don't match up and you have an extreme angle, then that lets you know that you were either not parallel or your lines, your receding lines were not headed to the same point. Okay, and then for this exercise, what we're going to do is, after we've drawn our 4 boxes, then I would like for you to go ahead and give the exterior a hard ink line, please. Here. Okay, so now we have our 4 boxes, and what I'd like us to do is work on 4 different things. So with our first box, we're going to understand perspective, center. So on a plane that is parallel to your person, to a true shape, we could take our ruler and place that down, and we could come and see that it's 3 inches and half of that is 1.5. And we could place our marker here, and that would let us know that's the halfway point, right? We could do the same thing. So let's make our mark right here. And we could do the same thing in that vertical, is that we could come through and find our halfway spot. Okay, so we have this idea of center being measured. So then we think about doing that on a plane that is receding. So that plane represents our depth, and it's traveling away from us, and we no longer have in our drawing, our edges top and bottom are parallel to one another, but they're starting to converge as they go back. So really the verticals are the only things that remain consistent on that receding plane, right? On this plane that's headed back towards our vanishing point. So when we try and do the measuring here, we can, but as we look at that, then this should be the halfway here, and then it gets tricky to do a halfway measurement vertically because we have a constantly changing angle here. So where do we measure from? Where I think my center mark is? Well, that doesn't, it's inaccurate and problematic in thinking around. So that's your first clue to let you know that that's not going to work. So here, when we do our measurements, that's wonderful. Another great way, so we have our cross right here, our X marks the spot for our measurements. So then what happens if I line up my ruler with one corner and come across to the opposite corner? I have a diagonal that runs right through my center measurement. And if I take my ruler corner to opposite corner, oh my gosh, I found center. It's amazing. So diagonals, those can help you to find your center in anything, right? If you're working on a planar form, right, that has these corners and you can come through those 4 corners, that will help you to find your center mark. Well, that is how you would find center in or on a plane that's receding, is you use those diagonals. So you place your ruler so that you've got it lined up with one corner, and then you're going to line up with the opposite corner and draw that diagonal. Take my ruler, come over here to a different corner, find its opposite, and draw a cross. Where those diagonals cross, that's center right there. So that moment is where I would like to place in a vertical line right at that center mark. And I would also like to place in a division horizontally. So one thing that we remember in constructing our boxes, that whatever we do on the top, we do on the bottom. Whatever we do on the left, we do on the right. If we're looking at a plane that has horizontals and verticals, then any marks that are on that plane need to be horizontal and vertical if they exist on the plane. So the same thing would hold true for a receding plane. Whatever we do on the left side, we do on the right, and anything inside would follow suit. So if I have a vertical on the left, a vertical on the right, if I'm going to divide this going across, then I would need a vertical line to divide. Now, when I look at division horizontally, I look at the top of that plane that's receding and the bottom of the plane that's receding, and I see that those go to the vanishing point. So if I make a division, that division also needs to go to the vanishing point. So again, right where my diagonals cross is center. So I'll line my ruler up with my vanishing point, and then I'm going to have it pass right through that X, and that's my middle right there. So we'll go ahead and ink that in here to here. Right, so we remain consistent. So on our plane that does not recede, here's our vertical, right? So whatever's happening on the left with those verticals, that's the same thing that's happening in the center. Whatever's happening on this plane is going to function the way that its outside perimeter does. And the same thing holds true, is that we'll be running a horizontal line here because our top and bottom edges of this plane are horizontal. So hopefully that makes sense to you. Whatever we're doing on the top, we're doing the bottom, and that's our guide for how we deal with information that is on that plane. And how wonderful is it that as we go in and place our center marks, that look at how that lines up from front plane to side plane, right? That center division here runs across, and then as this plane changes direction and recedes towards that vanishing point, then that line has to do the same thing. Okay, so this is perspective center. For our next exercise, we're going to use that concept of perspective center. So what we'll do is we want to evenly divide space. And it's really helpful to practice on a flat plane, a plane that's parallel to your person, because that seems sometimes a little bit easier for our mind to grasp. So we do our diagonals, opposite corner to opposite corner, and that gives us center. And then we're going to do that on our receding plane as well. Corner to opposite corner. Divide here. A little bit further to go. So I'm going to grab my bigger ruler, line up here. Line up here. There we go. So what I'd like for us to do, this is great practice. We're going to go ahead and, I'll use this one, maybe you can see it a little bit better, is let's go ahead and ink here and ink here. Okay? Now what I'd like for us to practice is, oh, Miss Dees, this looks very much like perspective center and finding that. Yes, it does. But right now I've divided the front plane and this receding plane on the side in two equal parts. So technically I have evenly divided the space. But what I'd like to show you is that you can continue that process and further divide that space. So on our flat plane or our frontal plane that doesn't recede, what we would do is we'll make a new set of diagonals to find the center of this space right here. So corner to corner from the center line, and do whatever you do on the left, do on the right. Corner to corner from the center line to our outside corners. And where that X, so our X is here and here, we'll place in a vertical line. And we have one more. Here. So now I've got quarters, right? I have 4 divisions within that front plane. So I want to do the same thing on my receding plane. So again, I already have 2 halves, and I want to split those so I get 4 equal parts. So what I'm going to do is start with my outside corner, and this time I'm going to go to that center line. And if you go from the outside corner to outside corner, you're going to get that same line, so that's going to let you know, oopsies, I need to do something different. So you're going to start from the outside corner, and then the opposite corner is going to end up being from that center line. So we're going to come through diagonals, again, outside corner to the top of the center line there. And then same thing on the other side, go from the center to the outside corner, and corner, center line. So we have our X marks the spot here and here, and that's where we would like to place in our vertical lines. Hey, buddy. Here. And then X marks the spot over here. There it is. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 spaces, and you could go even further, right? You could continue to divide. How would you make use of this? Well, this is a wonderful way if you're drawing lockers or cupboards or a design on a surface, because what I'm observing is that the space that's closer to this corner here, it appears wider, and it gets slightly more narrow as I go back. And that's because this side is receding away from me towards that vanishing point. So things get, their size diminishes and they get smaller, right? Well, I guess that would be diminishing size, but you also have that convergence is probably what I mean to say. So that's pretty rad. And that's how you would evenly divide space. I don't know if I already said it, but you could continue to do that. So you could come in and do your diagonals, and instead of 4 spaces, you could have more spaces. I like the way that sounds. More instead of 4. Okay, so that's how you evenly divide space. It's using the concept of diagonals to find perspective center, and then you keep going to create an even division within those spaces, and that multiplies your number. Okay, so the next thing that I would like for you to do is to create a pyramid. And why would we draw a pyramid? Well, because it is also an inclined plane. And an inclined plane deals with, so right now all of our angles in our subject go to our vanishing point, right? Anything that's a diagonal, except for finding perspective center. But on the structure here, the baselines, those all go towards a common point. But what happens if we have stairs or a ramp, a pitched roof, whatever, something could be at an angle that does not have to do with recession, and that would be called an inclined plane, and it has its own vanishing point. So the way that we're going to get a basic understanding of that is to construct a pyramid so that we would see how to raise another vanishing point and continue consistency with an incline or a decline. It functions the same way. So it looks like I need my longer ruler. So for my pyramid, what I'm going to do is I like to build it on top of my third box. So I'm going to find perspective center. Wow, it's funny that we started with that and we continue to work with it. Opposite corner to opposite corner. There we go. That's our center right here. Let's make a little mark. Boop. So right here, I would like to construct a vertical line. Just right at that center point. And I'm just going to raise it. That's fine right there. Okay. So right from my the middle of this plane here on the top of my box, I'm going to raise a vertical line, and right at the top of my vertical line, I'm going to place a point. And this is going to be called a trace point. So now I have this point from each corner here on this receding plane. I am going to connect to that trace point. So I'm going to come from this front corner up. See if my little ruler will stretch. Yep, just there. From this front corner to that trace point. From my back corner to my trace point. And from the other back corner to my trace point. There. Now, just like we had done, I would like for you to use your pen to ink in the exterior, and then we'll use our dotted line for the interior. So we'll start on this side. You will want to think about, I've been dragging some of my ink across my paper, so I'd like for you to think about that, and perhaps if you're right-handed, then you'll move from your right side to the left, giving that ink a chance to dry as you come across the surface. And then this last piece here. So exterior, and then from that back corner, we'll raise our little dotted line up. All right. So now we have this idea of, or you could, instead of a pyramid, you could think of it as a pitched roof, right? It looks sort of house-like ish. So that's how we're going to work through that, is we'll find perspective center along that top plane, and then from center, erect a vertical line. And it doesn't have to, I didn't want it to run into my box that's up here, so that, for me, I chose a spot that was underneath my top box. And then what I'd like to do is, once I draw that vertical line up at the very top, I place a point, which is a trace point. And then from each of these four corners on this receding plane, I'm going to go ahead and take convergence lines to that trace point, and that's what's going to give me that consistency in recession towards a new point that doesn't have to do with the horizon, right? This is aside from the horizon. Okay, and last but not least, we want to work with creating a circle in perspective, otherwise known as an ellipse, and the process could be called crating if you wanted it to. So there are a couple ways to go about it. So we've constructed our box, or what some would call our crate, and that is to house our circles. So we had, prior to linear perspective, talked about using basic shapes to work through construction on more complex forms or any forms. So I have this basic shape for linear perspective, and that's what's going to let me understand how other shapes move as they recede towards a common point. So it's helpful to me to again use perspective center. So I'm going to do this on the front plane that's flat to us, and I'm going to utilize that side plane, maybe even the top, but I think just these two will be good. So once I have center, then let's go ahead and divide vertical and horizontal. Okay, and then we'll do it on our side plane, corner to corner, right? And our vertical stays vertical. That's the thing about 1 and 2 point perspective that remains consistent, is that your verticals will all remain vertical. The only time that changes is when you're working in 3 point or a 3 point or more, because the third point would be rising up, and you could think of it in terms of looking at a skyscraper from the ground, or looking and at the skyscraper from an oblique angle, so the corner of it, and then if it was rising really high, you would need that to recede to a common point. And that's where your verticals would start to take on an angle. So remember, when I divide horizontally on my receding plane, on the side here, the top and the bottom use the vanishing point. So any information on that plane that is receding needs to use that point. So, all right. So I wanted to place in my markings because it will help me as I begin my process of building a circle. So our objective is to move through these major coordinates. So when we think about our cardinal directions, north, east, no, what is it? North and south, obviously. East and west. So that's how we want, so we want to move through those directions. And circles don't have corners. There's no corner in a circle. That's why it's a circle. It doesn't have that hard turn. So we want to be moving through these areas, not pointing at them. So my objective is here to here to stretch. So we're going to end up with something that's more of an oval. And then I'm going to be moving from here to here. And okay, so this is our idea, is that we've constructed this frame, and then we've gone through and divided it, and you can see that I've got more equal than not corner shape, corner shape, corner shape, corner shape. And maybe once I could look at it a little bit further and see how far away I am when I contact this angle, right? That could be helpful in seeing that I'm similar or dissimilar. So right about there and right about there would be good places for me to run through. Yeah? So that is how I'm working on a plane that is parallel to me or flat. The same thing is going to happen over here, but our corners are not going to be equal because we're on that plane that is converging and diminishing in size as it recedes. but we're still wanting to move through these cardinal points, not have corners, so no direct lines. So we're stretching and arching through. So you can see how, what a difference there is from here where that ellipse, right? This one is, right, an oval. It's more narrow than it is long. And then here we've got this funny elliptical shape, but it's being pulled back in this direction. So there are further divisions that we could do that would get us to be more specifically in line as we construct, where we didn't have to make such great stretches. It would be more incremental, shorter increments where we would touch along different lines, and that would give us placement, better placement for those curves. But this is the general idea, and that's going to give us the effect that we're looking for. So as I move around it, I'm going to use dotted lines. I am not, self-admittedly, not great at pulling an ink circle in one fell swoop. So I just choose not to. And I'm okay with that. And just as we were utilizing our broken line before, we can see that it works fairly well. See, I even did a boo-boo here on that one, even just doing that broken line. So I'll come through on my oh, I fear that I've squished this one a little bit. Okay, there it is. So those are going to be our circles slash ellipses. So that is what we're working on. And do your 4 squares or boxes, your boxes, and then we're going to work on perspective center. I would like for you to run your diagonals and find center for that front plane, and then I would like for you to practice that on that side plane, recalling that our verticals remain vertical. Whatever the left and right sides are doing, you'll do in the center. And then as we look at our top and bottom, those are connected through convergence lines to that vanishing point. So anything along that plane in the center, that division, that's going to connect to your vanishing point. And then go ahead and ink your permanent lines. On your second box, we're going to be dividing further. So instead of just having these 4 quadrants, we're going to find perspective center on the front plane and the side plane that's receding. And we'll not only divide in half, right, and have that vertical line, but then we'll go further and we'll make another division from outside corner to center line. Divide here, outside corner to center line. Divide here to have those 4 equal spaces. Then we'll come over to our receding plane, because it's nice to practice on something that's flat. It's a little bit easier for our mind to grasp the concepts and work through that new material on something that is square. So we're going to move on to our receding plane, find center, drop that vertical division so we have it in half, and then outside corner to center line, outside corner to center line diagonals. You'll find your newest division, and then we'll go from outside corner center, and drop in that last vertical. So we'll have those 4 equal spaces on that receding plane. We'll move on next to our pyramid on our 3rd box. So we already have our box. On the top of it, find perspective center. At that center point, erect a vertical line, and at the top of that vertical line, place a point. That's a trace point. And then from each of their 4 corners of that top plane, we'll take convergence lines back to that trace point. Exterior lines get hard, solid ink, and then that last interior line is going to get that broken or dotted line. For our last box, that is our circle or ellipse so our circle in perspective, otherwise known as an ellipse. And we'll find our perspective center, and we'll create our quadrants on the front, and then we'll do the same thing on that receding plane. Then we'll use our pencil still to come through and stretch with curves from cardinal point to cardinal point. You think of it as a face of a clock if you like to, if that's helpful. And we're going to be on that front plane looking for even negative space, right? This space here, the corners, you want those to be fairly even as you stretch through. And then we're going to be working through our receding plane the same way, as we're going to be stretching and curving through these major axis points. Here, curve around. And using your pencil, you'll get into more accuracy, and then you can take your pen to finish it with that dotted or broken line, and on the front as well as that receding plane. And that'll do ya. So let's make sure we got all 10 of our boxes. Go ahead and label them numerically so that as you're labeling them, because you'll have a lot of lines, you may get a little bit bogged down visually with how many lines are there. So go through and count your boxes to make sure that you have 10. That would be really great. It's such a bummer that a technicality, right, would cost you some points. So let's make sure we have all of them. And then exterior lines after construction and graphite to make sure everything's accurate. Your exterior gets that hard solid line in ink, and then all the interior information is dotted or broken. And then come on back and work through these 4 concepts. All right. You guys are all set. I am excited to see how you tackle this material with ease and grace. And yeah, let's keep drawing. Great job, everyone. Happy week, happy drawing.